We'll get started. It's going. They're yours.
Like Lieutenant Duncan said, my name is Michael Halloran. I'm an assistant city attorney at the city of Columbus. My primary responsibility is to provide general counsel to the Columbus Division of Fire. I also work in litigation over there, so I represent everybody from employees of the Division of Fire, Division of Police, public utilities, any types of lawsuits. I don't do employment law because I represent the employees, so that would be a conflict of interest, right, if I did those things. I do have a background as a firefighter and paramedic, so most of the examples I'm going to use are probably examples of my misgivings over the last 13, 14 years of my career. Ask as many questions as you want. I did a portion of this last year during the medic refresher, but this is more of an expanded documentation. Focuses specifically on things that I've done bad that now I realize as an attorney doing litigation that things should be done differently. So ask as many questions as you want. Use examples because I don't think without the examples things don't really come alive and jump off the page. I really do think that everything that we do EMS-wise needs to be at least anchored or focused or viewed through what our goal is. And I really think our goal within EMS is to facilitate a patient's definitive care. Right? We don't cure people, we don't heal people. What we do is provide some time to get them from point A to point B. Right? We take cardiac patients to cardiac centers, trauma patients to trauma centers. While we're going there, we do some things that reduce the chance for death and long-term disability, some treatments. We're buying folks time. The area that I don't think we're that good at as an EMS, as an agency or an entity or an industry as a whole, is really allocating resources where they need to be most. So I'm sure most of you have encountered a patient, at least I'm making an assumption here, you've encountered a patient where you thought there is nothing that the emergency department, that EMS, or that anybody could have done to help this person right now. Right? The decision that could have affected the trajectory of this patient's circumstances probably could have been made around 5th or 6th grade. It's a little bit of a joke, right? But what I'm actually saying is sometimes we're not the proper resource. But the folks who make policies don't understand those things because the only lens they have to view what you do on the street and the changing circumstances that you're encountering on a daily basis, because this isn't 1985 anymore, is the documentation and the way that things are documented. So when I talk about documentation, I'm really viewing what I think is important for us to do within this goal, which is to facilitate a patient's definitive care, whether or not we're the right entity to do it or not. So with that in mind, here's what I think the purposes of the patient care report are. Right? First and foremost, it is not for you as the author to write the patient care report. The purpose is not for you. The purpose is for people who are reading it. Right? You were there. You don't need, maybe if you want to keep it as a journal, write things down so you can remember it. It's a little bit of a joke. Please don't keep a notebook of all your patients laying in the back seat of your car. My mom's told me a few times that sometimes my sarcasm is hard to pick up, but that's okay. First and foremost, it's a medical record. It's a medical record of what we did as EMS providers for the patient, the circumstances that we saw, the treatment that we administered. It's also the first stage in a long line of medical records. Right? If you take a patient to the emergency department, you saw that patient in their home, at the scene of the accident, wherever it may be. You did treatment and you assessed the patient. They get to the emergency department. Some of those assessments or treatment may change based upon things that you observed, treatment that you rendered, changes in assessment from minute 1 to minute 30 to minute 60. So it's a medical record that's important not only for what you have done, but also for medical providers downstream to rely on. Now, I don't know exactly how much medical providers downstream, say, in an intensive care unit or a surgeon, a trauma surgeon, or someone else relies on EMS records. But I know at a certain level they do. They read them. They want to know what the paramedics or the EMS providers saw. The second thing is quality assurance and peer review. Right? If we don't review our own conduct thoroughly, somebody else is going to do it for us, and I guarantee the results that the other people come up with aren't going to be as good or as clean or as satisfying as results that we can come up with ourselves. So if we want to make sure we're doing what we should be doing when we should be doing it, we have to ensure that the documentation satisfies our quality assurance and peer review. Research and quality improvement is the third big thing. Now, I hated, one of my biggest pet peeves, hate's probably a strong word, when I wrote on a medic all the time, was sometimes I felt like I was on a hamster wheel. I used to characterize it like I felt like I was the guy walking behind an elephant in a parade, but we could never get the elephant to go in the right spot. You know what I'm saying? So I always had to shovel it up. The elephant's still eating, it's still coming out, but nothing's changing. Well, rather than just complain about it, sit on a tailboard and smoke and joke about things, right? The way that we address those problems is through research and quality improvement, right? How can we do our jobs better to ensure that we're allocating our resources the right way, or communicating effectively to the community so that they know what resources to use? Because 911 is not the resource for everything, contrary to what we've been teaching middle school and elementary school kids for the last 20 years. Right? If you got a problem, call 911. Now we're all upset that everybody calls 911 all the time. That, again, that's a little bit of a joke. In insurance reimbursement, most organizations, most cities, most townships, most county EMS cannot survive only on tax dollars. EMS is an expensive, expensive business, and it's not high profit, right? If it was high profit, everybody'd do it. The government wouldn't be the leading agency or the leading entity that runs EMS. Right? If we don't document appropriately, we don't get the appropriate insurance reimbursement back. Likewise, we're not going to continue to operate the way that we need to. Now, I don't think it's the first thing. In my opinion, it's number 4. But if you have a quality medical record that can be used for quality assurance, peer review, research, and quality improvement, you're going to have a medical record that satisfies insurance reimbursement. And I think there's an understanding or a philosophy that we're documenting certain things just to increase our EMS billings. And I think the mindset needs to be that as long as we have a good medical record, the insurance reimbursement will fall into place. Now, every textbook on EMS, most every paramedic class I've ever taught, the primary purpose that most students or people think for documenting appropriately is what?
Covering your rear end.
Yeah, CYA. But I don't have that anywhere on the list. And the reason why is because I don't think it's a purpose at all. But I do think that your A will be covered if you have a good medical record that you can use for quality assurance and peer review, that you can use for research and quality improvement, and that serves its purpose as insurance reimbursement, right? And that's got to be your mindset, to think about those 4 purposes, not just CYA. CYA doesn't get you anywhere. It's selfish. It focuses on what the purpose, what the needs of the author are versus the needs of the reader. Right? And if you document something to CYA, I guarantee any experienced litigator will be able to cross-examine you and tear it apart. Versus a narrative or some other type of documentation that accurately reflects what went on in a very consistent and objective manner. I think that it's important to talk about general writing skills. When I was in high school, I went to high school with a guy whose dad was a firefighter. And I remember him telling one of the football coaches, I didn't really need to get good grades in English because I'm going to go be a firefighter. And the football coach looked at him and said, you must have no idea what firefighters do now, right? And I kind of brushed it off when I was 16, but by the time I was 20, I realized, hey, it's probably a good idea to know basic subject-verb conjugation things. So some general writing skills I think are important, right? First, I think we need to understand who's going to be the audience and why the audience is reading it. Right? Most people write things today for selfish purposes. Facebook, Twitter, they write them because they want to express some view. But that's not the reason why we're writing patient care reports. We have a purpose, an intended audience. And the intended audience are folks who are reading it because of those 4 purposes I listed earlier. Right? So medical record, it's going to be physicians, nurses, maybe other paramedics down the road who are treating that patient. Could be a researcher later on, or a hospitalist, or somebody in the ICU that needs to understand what happened a week ago. The quality assurance and peer review, that's going to be read by within house or maybe out of house, depending on who's doing the QA. But they're looking, did you do what you needed to do when you needed to do it? Now, I don't know about this firehouse, but in every other firehouse I've been in, the common complaint is they don't understand what I'm doing. Well, instead of looking at them, not understanding what I'm doing, maybe I need to have some internal reflection and look at what I'm doing to help them understand what it is I do every day. And I realized there was a big difference between me in 2004 versus somebody who became a paramedic in 1981 and really hadn't rode on a medic since 1993. Right? The things that I saw in 2004, the skills that I was given, that I've learned, and it became abundantly clear to me one time when a lieutenant didn't know how to use a 12 loop. Why? Because the lieutenant had never been on a medic past a Life Pack 5. So I need to educate the folks who are doing quality assurance and peer review through good, sound documentation. Quality improvement and research. If I get upset at the current state of affairs, I have nothing to blame it on but myself if my documentation's bad. An insurance reimbursement, somebody who's going to deny a claim, they have to be able to see that you did what satisfies the insurance reimbursement along the way. So think about all those of the audience, why they're going to read those things. I think it's important that we create a picture when we're doing these things, when we're documenting, whether it's through just filling out blanks or pull down boxes, or actually through the narrative. And this is the most important thing, I think, the number one thing that is not done in the EMS field, is documenting circumstances upon which the conclusion rests. So a lot of people will document the conclusion, right, but not the circumstances. And the conclusion can be open to a lot of different circumstances. So here's a conclusion: patient upset and hallucinating. Right? Those are conclusions. Right? I concluded based upon what I saw or what I told that the patient was upset, or that the patient was hallucinating. Now compare that to patient pacing, speaking quickly, doesn't make eye contact. Patient sees wolves running through the house. Now that is the circumstances that leads me to the conclusion that patients are upset and hallucinating. Now this, patient is upset and hallucinating, can be interpreted many different ways by many different people who do not see things the same way that you do. But if you say, well, the patient was pacing, they were speaking quickly, they weren't making eye contact, and they were seeing wolves running through the house, that pretty much locks it down. It lets everybody know what it was you saw, what the circumstances were that you encountered. Now, if the next sentence said, patient stated she peed on her feet, we'd all know that the patient wasn't hallucinating, because why do you pee on your feet when wolves are running through your house? Not up on Worthington? It's to keep them away, right? Sentence structure is important, right? Subject, verb, clause, basic sentence structure, 5th, 6th grade grammar, right here. Now let's think about these two sentences. These are 4-word sentences. Patient moved to cot. What is the mental image that you get?
They're walking to the cot.
They're walking to the cot. Versus moved patient to cot. What is the mental image that you get?
We assisted them to the cot.
We took the action. I or the crew or whatever is implied. Moved is the verb, the clause is patient to cot. Versus here, patient is the subject, moved is the verb, to cot is the clause. Now, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes in the city of Columbus or elsewhere, throughout, actually EMS, one of the most common complaints is, the crew made me walk to the cot. Now, if all I have is your patient care report and it said patient moved to cot, that's pretty clear that the patient did walk to the cot. Versus over here, moved patient to cot, well, we actually did. Right, so when there's complaints levied against someone for the type of care that they provided, or even questions downstream, well, the patient walked to the cot or was moved to the cot before, but now they can't walk or use their legs. Now we have a change in the patient's condition. All this just by moving 2 words around will drastically change the meaning. Right? So we have to pay attention to detail with those 2 things. Let's look at paragraph structure. I don't know much about your guys. Actually, I don't know anything about your protocol, but when you have a patient with SVT, what's your first dose of adenosine? Is it 6 or 12? 6. Okay. Now, and my protocol, I think the AHA says this, if the patient's been treated prior with adenosine or other types of meds, you can jump straight to the 12. Is that right? Okay. So think about these two paragraphs, and now we're not looking about the structure of words in the sentence, but the positioning of sentences in a paragraph. So here's our first one. Patient states treated 2 years prior with adenosine. Patient states previously prescribed verapamil. Admin 6 milligrams of adenosine, no effect. Admin 12 milligrams with conversion. Based upon this top paragraph, when did the paramedic or the EMS provider know that the patient had been previously treated with adenosine? Right away.
First sentence.
Right? Right away. Patient states they previously prescribed. When did the paramedic or the EMS provider know that the patient had been previously prescribed verapamil? Prior to or after I administered 6 milligrams of adenosine? Prior to, because that's where it is in the order. We typically think of things chronologically. Now, again, I don't know what it's like up here, but where I used to work, sometimes patients wouldn't always tell me things right away. Right? And sometimes that would affect my treatment. Now think about this paragraph down here. Administered 6 milligrams of adenosine. No effect. Patient states treated 2 years prior with adenosine. Patient states previously prescribed verapamil. Admin 12 milligrams of adenosine with conversion. Now when did I as the EMS provider know that the patient had been previously treated by adenosine and had been prescribed verapamil? After I gave the 6 milligrams. Now this is a true story. This actually happened. I asked the patient, have you ever had any prior histories of SVT? Have you ever been treated? No, no, no. I gave 6 milligrams of adenosine. She went, whew, that feels cold. Oh, I had that before. And I've been feeling bad over the last week to 2 weeks, I think because I don't have my verapamil prescription. It ran out, and I don't have any money to get any new ones. Now, if I had documented it this way, what would my EMS supervisor looking at it had known, what would they have inferred about my treatment? Was it proper? No. Now, if I documented it this way, would they infer that my treatment was proper?
Yes.
Right. So just switching around of 2 sentences within a paragraph will drastically change the meaning. Right? And I know you're probably sitting there thinking, like, when was the last time you were on a call at 3:30 in the morning? Right? After a 12, 15, 20 call day. You don't have time to sit down and do this. Plus, my fingers are huge, and they gave me that crappy electronic thing to do patient care reporting on. I can't